أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. Amma ba'd, sisters and brothers in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the tawfiq again, for this opportunity of the fasting during the month of Ramadan. It's an important element of the Islamic teachings where we get this opportunity once a year in order to improve ourselves spiritually. Fasting has nothing to do with physical fitness, although it's a accidental byproduct and it's a good thing. Although I wonder how many people lose the weight at the end with mashallah the iftar and the sahri that we have. But the main purpose, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in Surah Baqarah, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, hopefully you will exercise taqwa. That is the main purpose of fasting, to be able to gain control of ourselves, our desires, and whatever decision that we make is based on the rida and the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like the previous years, we have been looking at different surahs from the Quran. And I think last year, instead of going through a whole surah, we just selected a section from Surah Kahf, where we talked about the story of Prophet Musa and Hazrat Khizr alayhim salatu wasalam. Now, for this year, for the 2 weeks that inshallah I'll be with you, I'd been looking at different surahs and finally settled down with Suratu l-Insan, which is surah number 76 of the Quran. I think last year we discussed Suratul Qiyamah. Surah Talaq. Oh, okay. It's just like Brexit, Even when we went to a part, there are problems there. I just came back from England yesterday afternoon, so that's the example I have in mind for talaq these days. That even when you have a part, there are problems in there, let alone getting together. The surah, which is known as Suratul Insan, is surah number 76 of the Quran. And when we look at the name of this surah, there are three names for it. One is Suratul Insan, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right in the beginning, talks about the human being. The other name for it is Suratul Dahr, the time. And again, that is also coming from the very first ayat of that surah, where Allah talks about a period of time. And the third most famous name for it, which is also in the ahadith of our Ma'asumin mostly, is a surah which is known as Surah Hal Ata. Hal Ata are the two words which start in this surah. And we'll talk about the meaning of what does Hal Ata mean. Now, when we look at these three surahs, basically the Prophet himself talks about the importance of this surah. For almost all surahs, there are some ahadiths which talk about the virtue and importance and the reward of the surah. The Prophet actually says, whoever recites Surah Hal Ata, his reward from Allah will be the paradise Jannah and Harir. Harir means silk, referring to one of the important, blessings of Jannah. Our fifth Imam, Imam Baqir, says, whoever recites Surah Hal Ata, he will be with the Prophet on the day of Qiyamah. So it has its own importance. As far as the theme of this surah is concerned, There are two important themes, a major theme of the surah, and then there is a minor theme. The major theme basically is about the virtue and excellence of human being. What is the potential in the human being that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created? And so there he begins by talking about the creation, the amazing creation of the human being, and we'll come to that ayat from ayat number 2 onwards from tomorrow. He talks about the ability that he has given to the human beings to accept the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He also, of course, talks about, that he guided us, and he also has not created us like machines or robots. We actually have been given freedom of choice. Not in a sense that he wants us to choose whatever we want. No. He has shown us the right way and the wrong way, and he says the potential which is in there, it will come out when you choose the right path. And so he is not forcing us to do things or not to do things. He says you will face the consequences in the hereafter. You are the one who actually decide what will happen to you in the hereafter. Whether the hereafter is going to be blissful or painful, it's your choice. And I'm not making you majboor. And this is where we have the famous statement from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, where he says, La jabr wa la tafweez. There is no compulsion when it comes to actions of human being. Wa la tafweez. It is not even that Allah has handed over the powers to the human beings and he has no more control over them. Bal al-amr bayn al-amrayn. The reality, according to the sixth Imam, is somewhere in between jabr and tafweez. Then, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that major theme talks about the consequences of obedience and disobedience. If you follow that path by your own choice, there is a reward in Jannah at the end. And if you disobey the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know the consequences. And this major theme actually ends with a long story, and that actually is the main part of this surah, which is known as Surah Dahr or l-Insan. And this is actually the story, because after talking about the good people, the bad people, the potential that he has given to us, Allah wanted to give us an example. And the example is actually a very beautiful story of the 3-day fasting of the Ahlul Bayt. And that is actually, I would say, almost 60% of the surah. And so when you hear the word sometimes that, Quran is the qasida of Ahlul Bayt, this surah definitely is the qasida of the Ahlul Bayt. Salawat pढ़ने पर और. Of course, there are many different lessons to be derived from it. So we will go through this story, but gradually from one stage to another, looking at different issues and learning lessons from it, inshallah. The minor theme of this surah, and that is at the end, is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the gradual revelation of the Quran. And we've talked about it before, that there is one revelation which took place in Laylatul Qadr, which is only for the Prophet. It is for his heart. It is not for proclaiming it to the human society. And that was the revelation of the entire Quran. And then there is this revelation which is a gradual revelation, starting with the incident in the cave of Hira on the 27th of Rajab in the 40th year of the life of the Prophet, and continued almost towards the last days of the Prophet of Islam. And so that is one issue that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about it. And then he talks about the importance of following his commandments. Especially he singles out, there is one ayat in this surah where he talks about the timing of the 5 daily prayers. And that is also a very interesting ayat. We will see whether it is 3 timings or 5 timings separately. But you have to wait for it. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, ends with the warning that, If you follow the evil people, the sinners, you'll have to face the consequences of disobedience. And if you follow the good people, of course, you will have khair and barakah. This evening I'll only talk about first ayat of this surah Insan, and then we'll maybe go through a fiqhi mas'ala about fasting, and then inshallah continue the tafsir tomorrow. As far as the first ayat is concerned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. Then they come over the human being a period of time when he was not anything worth mentioning. Yeah, just zero, nothing. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually making us realize that creation itself is a very important blessing that Allah has given to us. We didn't choose to come to this dunya, and we couldn't have logically done that. If we were not there is no issue of choice. Sometimes people say, well, I'll complain to Allah, why didn't you ask me whether I want to come to the dunya or not? Well, you were lam yakun shay'an madhkura. You were not even there. You didn't exist. And so there was a time when human beings were not there, and this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, that remember, you were nothing, and when you were nothing, you were not even worth mentioning. When he mentioned many other things which already existed, Insan was not part of that picture. What is Insan? Of course, the answer is very simple. In Arabic language, the word Insan is, it doesn't have a gender. It is used for male and female equally. And basically, it is used for a human being. But there is a dispute among the Arabic experts of language. During the early days when Arabic grammar was formalized, the language existed from before, but the rules and regulations were formalized later on, actually in the Islamic era. It was Amir al-Mu'mineen who actually called one of his companions when he heard some people reciting the Quran in a wrong way. In the Kufi script of the Quran, not only that there were no dots and nuqtas, there were no signs, fatah, kasra, dhamma, pesh, zair, nothing like this. And so a person ended up reciting an ayat in a way where the meaning was very wrong from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted. And so so Amir al-Mu'mineen then called one of his companions and asked him, basically dictated to him the basic grammar rules of Arabic language. And this is where it started, and then this formalization of the Arabic grammar expanded to the extent that during the later period, the two major centers became the source of Arabic grammar. One is Kufa and the other was Basra. And many times the people of Basra and the people of Kufa have disputes about some of the words. Those who know Urdu, there is sometimes difference in the Urdu used in Lucknow and in Delhi. The poets of Delhi would consider the poets of Lucknow to be down, and the poets of Lucknow would consider the poets of Delhi to be down. So these things are there. So that Lucknow and Delhi in Arabic becomes Kufa and Basra. So the experts of Arabic grammar in in Kufa used to say that Insan, the original root of this word comes from uns. Uns means, to be friendly with someone, sociable with someone, or a group, a person with whom you feel the uns. You have the pleasure when you are in the presence of that person. The people of Basra, those who are experts of the language, they said no, insan is not from uns, it is from nisyan. And nisyan means forgetfulness. And this is what they are talking about. Essentially, both, whether you look at it from uns or from nisyan, it reflects two, important characteristics of human beings. On one side, you have that human beings, cannot really survive individually. They have to be part of the group, whether it's a smaller unit of family or an entire community and the society. Human beings are, as we call them, social animals. They cannot survive in isolation. And so that is reflected by the term uns. And the other one, nisyan, of course, human being is forgetful. And we are most forgetful of the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our life. That is the meaning of taqwa. Taqwa means to be always conscious of Allah's presence in our life. And so that is the challenge that we have. So sometimes, maybe it's a reflection of our name. Nisyan. Anyways, as I written there that, my preference, of course, is the root uns. That's where the insan comes from. And even the term, humanity, insaniyat, in Arabic and Eastern languages reflects that pleasant and sociable, perspective of a human being. There is a debate among some of the scholars whether, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then there come over the human being a period of time when he was not anything worth mentioning. Is Allah talking about one individual, Adam alayhi salam, as the first human being? Or is he referring to insan in general? Well, the second ayat actually answers that. And we will discuss it tomorrow, where he says, I created the human beings from one, drop of sperm. And that is not Adam alayhi salam. Adam was created by turab and with the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is where we see mostly the preferred opinion would be that insan here refers to the general human beings and not specifically to our father Adam alayhi salam. Now, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he was not anything worth mentioning, basically this dunya was created before us. And this is where, if there was any description of what was there, anyone, whether the malaika or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or even jinn who were before us, could talk about the sky, they could talk about the earth and the weather and the greenery and the water and the animals, but insan was not there in the picture. Insan comes at the end of that process of creation. And actually there is an important message that we can learn from it, and that is the issue is that are we for this dunya or is this dunya for us? So even the sequence of creation answers that question. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Baqarah says, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي الْعَرْضِ جَمِيعًا, that He is the one who created for you whatever is in the earth. Jami'an, everything is for you. You are not for this dunya. The dunya is for you. And you are for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is where we have to always realize, sometimes people say, well, I was born here, I'll die, and that is the beginning and end of my story. No. We have to understand our own worth. We are more important than just this material world that we see. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to give us a very higher status, but He says, instead of just giving you that position free where you wouldn't be able to appreciate it, I would like you to work for it and be worthy of that. And this dunya is for us, but we are not for this dunya. And this is where that relationship between human beings and this dunya, if it is understood properly, then it becomes really very easy to handle the challenges that we see in this dunya. When we talk about the akhirah, it doesn't mean we shun the dunya. We have been told that you build your akhirah in this dunya. You will have no chance of building the akhirah in the akhirah. Whatever is to be done, you do in this dunya. So this is actually the ground where we prepare ourselves for the akhirah. We build our akhirah in this dunya. Because after we die, we will not be able to do anything. Yes, those who are left behind, the family and the friends, if they remember us, they will do what is known as isal sawab, convey the sawab of the good deeds that they do to us over there. But we will not be able to be in a position to build the akhirah over there. And this is something it's important keeping in mind, that even the sequence of creation where the human being comes at the end is that the dunya was created and prepared for the arrival of Hazrat l-Insan. You are not the slave of this dunya. The dunya should be your slave. And if that is the relationship, then it becomes very easy to decide how to earn our livelihood, whether from haram or halal. Where we have to even give up things that we might desire, but we know this is immoral and illegal from Islamic point of view. If that relationship is there, then it becomes very easier to handle this challenge of this dunya. Salawat pढ़ने के बाद one more final statement before I go to the fiqhi mas'ala for the fasting. This statement, hal ata, is a question. Didn't there come over the human being a period of time when he was not anything worth mentioning? Now, although grammatically it is formed in a istifham, as a question, but actually it's not a question. It is actually another, style of speech where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making stating a fact. He's not really waiting for your answer. Sometimes your child is led to go to school, and you turn and you say, when does your school start? It's not that you don't know. It's not that he doesn't know. You're just reminding him that he is late. So sometimes the questions are asked not for seeking the answer, rather just to to state a fact. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He says that, He is not really asking a question here. He's making a statement that, remember that there was a time when dunya was there, you were not there. And at that time, you were nothing worth mentioning. So inshallah, we'll continue with this discussion tomorrow night. Salawat पढ़ने के बाद. Five more minutes before we conclude. One of the important issues I wanted to discuss tonight, because it is already the beginning of Ramadan. MashaAllah, the masail of fasting, the list of what is haram and forbidden. One more important issue that I would just like to remind is the issue of niyyat. Niyyat is very important in Islam, especially when we talk about ibadat. And we have to keep in mind that the niyyat and the intention should be that whatever we do, we are doing for the sake of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we look at this process, you have to realize that, actions and deeds in Islam gain value only because of the niyyat. And I talked about this before. I would like to just emphasize it again, that when we look at one another, we see the action of the other fellow, and then we say, well, he is a good person because he does good things. When we look at another person and we see he is doing bad things, we say he is an evil person. Our judgment about individuals is based on the deeds and the actions that we see. Why we judge that way? Because we don't have the ability to know what is in his mind and what is in his heart. So we only look at Zahir and we pass the judgment that he is a good person or he is not a good person. Sometimes we would like to, impose our standard and limitations on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we say, oh yes, so and so, gave away half of his, millions of dollars in charity, so therefore he is definitely going to go to Jannah. Because you are looking at Zahir. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of Qiyamah, He is not looking at the deed. He will look at the niyyat of the individual. And the amal and actions would be accepted on the basis of the niyyat of the doer, not the deed. And this is very important to keep in mind. Just one ayat about it from Surah number 17, Surah Isra, ayat 18 and 19. So it's easy to remember. 17 Surah, ayat 18, 19. But Allah says, Man kana yuridu al-ajila ajjalna lahu. Whoever desires this present world, the luxury here, the comfort here, the fame here, the power in this dunya, ajjalna lahu fiha. We will grant to that person in this dunya, we will reward them. Ma nasha'u liman nurid. Of course, there also Allah keeps the control in His hand. He says, we will reward the way we want and the person whom we want to reward in this dunya. He doesn't think about akhirah, he's only thinking about dunya. ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَا لَهُ جَهَنَّمَ يَصْلَاهَا. What will happen in the akhirah? Allah says, I will show him his way towards Jahannam. Because this is what you wanted. You wanted dunya, you got your dunya. And you will go into the Jahannam, madmuran, madhura, despised and driven away. And the opposite of that, next ayat, وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ, and whoever seeks the hereafter, وَسَعَى لَهَا سَعْيَهَا, and works hard for it in this dunya, وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ. This condition comes again and again whenever he talks about the reward in the akhirah. Provided he has iman, true iman, فَأُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. Allah says that we will, appreciate and reward them for their hard work. Allah says we will be mashkur for the good work that He has done. And so, especially when we talk about ibadat, this is very, very important. And when it comes to fasting, of course, it is one of the important ibadat. And we have to make sure that our intention is pure for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In case of fasting, it is easy. Because in all other good deeds that you do, whether it's namaz or zakat or khums or hajj or jihad or khayat and sadaqat, you are doing things. And when you are doing things, there is a chance of displaying it, showing it off. But in Ramadan, what do? You don't do anything. You don't eat, you don't drink, you don't smoke. So there is no way that you can show your fasting to anyone. So the chances of, showing off and riyakari in fasting is much, much less. Unless somebody wants to always have a gloomy face in the month of Ramadan. And reflect that I'm fasting. That's another thing. But there is there's much, much less chance of, showing off what we do when fasting is concerned. And so, From that perspective, alhamdulillah, we already have an advantage there. Now, coming to the actual niyat issue, people sometimes think that we have to stand up, get ready at the sahar time, and just before Fajr or the Fajr's time, say, I am fasting today, the 6th of May, the first day of Ramadan, 1440, wajib qurbatan ilallah. You don't have to do that. As I said it before, the problem is when we go to madrasa in childhood, because we cannot comprehend the concept of niyat, we are told, okay, stand up, do the niyat, 2 rakat namaz fajr pad raha hu, wajib qurbatan ilallah. Because a child cannot understand the niyat of the concept of niyat, this is how we teach them. The problem is once they graduate, we never say that, niyat is not verbal. You don't really have to say anything. Niyat in all the ibadat is something in your mind. As long as you know what you are doing, that is sufficient. So those who missed the Sahri and were not, awake at the time of Fajr, don't worry about it. Sometimes I get called, Maulana, it's 11 in the morning. I just got up now. What happens to my roza? I didn't do the niyat. It's okay. You don't have to worry about it. You are not required to stay and say the niyat every day. You can do the niyat, again, not verbally. Just have that intention in your mind, right in the beginning of Ramadan, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm going to fast for this entire month of Ramadan. From Fajr to Maghrib time, qurbatan ilallah. Just that intention is sufficient. You don't have to repeat it then every day, and you don't have to say it verbally. However, there is one mas'ala that we have, is that your niyat from Fajr to Maghrib must continue uninterruptedly. What does that mean? It doesn't mean you have to constantly remind yourself, I'm fasting, I'm fasting, I'm fasting. No, when the mas'ala says istidamatun niyyah, that the niyat must continue from Fajr to Maghrib, it means that you should not do any niyat which will be contrary to the niyat of fasting. So for example, if it's 10 in the morning and you say, well, I have decided I'm going to travel out of town. Your niyat now is contradicting the niyat of fasting. And that's where the issue would be. So when we are told that we have to maintain our niyat till the end, it just means that don't do a niyat which will be completely opposite of the niyat of fasting. So it's already, let's say, 6 in the evening, you have been fasting for the whole day. Your wife was cooking your best dish for that iftar. The smell was really overcoming. And for a moment you say, maybe I should go and eat now. Not wait for Maghrib time. If you do that niyat, that the desire is so strong, you do the niyat that, no, I'm not going to go and eat the biryani or pulao or whatever is there. That niyat invalidated your niyat of fasting. So you go to the kitchen and your wife picks up the spoon and says, be ashamed, the children are fasting also, wait till Maghrib. So you go back. What happens to your fasting? Your niyat contradicted the niyat of fasting. Your roza becomes batil because you did not eat after that. You did not follow up practically with your niyat of eating. So you only have to do qada. You don't have to pay kafara for it. But suppose you overcome the spoon and add by force, then not only qaza, you also have to pay the kafara for that. And so remember that, niyat is important, but not that complicated. Don't worry about it. Inshallah. Salawat.